Before the bells and the candles, imagine a stone corridor that never truly sleeps. A monk lights the first taper, a quill waits in the scriptorium, herbs breathe in the dark garden. Tonight, we'll walk the cloisters and libraries of the Middle Ages, quiet, warm, and unhurried. I would love to hear what part of the world you are listening from, so feel free to comment below. Adjust your volume and settle in. The bells are about to ring. Mist clings to the fields when the first bell tolls, soft and slow, rolling over the hills like a breath of the earth itself. The Abbey stands quiet in the half-light, its stone walls silver with dew, its roofs dark against the paling sky. Beyond the cloister ghat, where grass gleams wet and fresh, the sound of the bell hums through the arcades and along silent corridors, calling the brothers from sleep. Within the dormitory, rows of narrow beds line whitewashed walls. Each brother rises without haste but without delay, practiced in the rhythm of early prayer. Woolen habits are pulled on against the lingering night chill. Sandals whisper on worn flagstones. No one speaks. The only sounds are the creak of wood, the soft rustle of cloth, and the steady tolling of the bell. They gather in a long procession, each man a quiet shadow in the lantern's pale light. Together they move toward the church, their path winding through cool passages where candles flicker before simple saints' images. The air smells faintly of beeswax and damp stone, touched by the sweet scent of gardens beyond the cloister. Though the hour is early, the house is awake in its own measured way, every step guided by prayer and long tradition. The great door of the church stands open. Inside, darkness lingers like a veil. Only the sanctuary lamp burns steadily before the altar, casting a small red glow on polished wood. As the brothers enter, the hush deepens. They bow one by one and take their places in the choir stalls, their movements practiced yet reverent. The bell's final note fades, leaving only the soft sound of breathing and the faint sigh of the wind through high windows. A single voice begins the first prayer of the day. It rises gentle and unadorned, then others join until the room fills with low chant, neither hurried nor showy, but steady as tide against shore. The Latin words flow like water over stone, carrying centuries of devotion. In the quiet dark, the music seems less sung than breathed, a sound born of stillness and offered back to it. Outside, the world brightens slowly. Light creeps across the fields, touches the orchard, climbs the cloister walls. The church windows, still dark from within, begin to gather hints of dawn blue and pearl, then faint gold. Birds stir in the eaves, their small wings fluttering as if caught between sleep and waking. Yet inside the service continues, unchanged, unhurried, following the same path it has for generations. When the final Amen is sung, silence falls like a gentle cloak. The brothers bow once more and rise, filing out with the same quiet they brought in. The day has begun, but it will unfold not with bustle, but with calm purpose. Each man knows his tasks, some to the kitchen, some to gardens or workshop, some to the scriptorium where books wait patiently. Yet before work begins, there is breakfast, simple bread, soft cheese, a little watered ale to warm the stomach. In the refectory, Long tables gleam with the soft sheen of ware. Benches creak as the brothers sit and the reader takes his place at the lectern. His voice begins a passage from the lives of saints, smooth and low, filling the room as hands break bread and lift wooden bowls. No one speaks. The words of the reading are enough, their calm rhythm matching the steady pace of the meal. The bread is fresh, baked in the Abbey ovens before dawn. Its crust crackles faintly under gentle pressure, releasing the warm smell of wheat. Cheese, pale and mild, rests in small wedges beside each plate. The meal is humble but satisfying, a quiet gift before labor. When the reader closes the book and the last crumbs are brushed away, the abbot rises and blesses the day. Bowed heads answer with a silent prayer. Afterward, the brothers disperse to their duties. Some head toward the great kitchen, where more bread will be made for the day and a pot of pottage set to simmer. The kitchen is warm already, lit by the glow of banked coals. Copper pots hang from hooks. The smell of herbs and baking fills the air. Monks move with measured grace, each knowing his place in the well-worn rhythm. Others walk to the gardens just beyond the cloister wall. Here the morning air is fresh and damp, scented with earth and dew. Rows of cabbages and leeks stretch in neat lines, while beyond them stand beds of herbs for medicine and cooking, thyme, sage, fennel, mint. Bees drift lazily among the blooms, slow in the cool hour but already humming. The brothers tend the soil, their hands unafraid of dirt, for here too they serve. The Scriptorium wakes in its own fashion. Tall windows admit pale light that glimmers on stacks of parchment and pots of ink. Monks settle at narrow desks, arranging quills, knives for scraping, brushes for gold leaf. One smooths a blank sheet, another mixes fresh ink from soot and water. Soon the quiet room fills with the faint scratch of quills, a soft, persistent whisper like wind through dry reeds. Illuminators work more slowly, painting letters with patient care. A brush tipped with red or blue makes each capital bloom like a tiny flower. Gold leaf catches the dawn and flashes for a moment before being pressed flat. These books will go to libraries and scholars, perhaps to distant abbeys, carrying the thoughts of long-dead saints to new hands. Each stroke feels small but meaningful, a part of something greater than the man who makes it. The cloister ghat at the center of all is a place of gentle passage. Its grass is wet with dew, its covered walks echo softly with sandal steps. Now and then a monk pauses there for silent prayer or quiet reflection, breathing in the cool morning air. Birds flit from column to column, unconcerned with the silent watchers below. Sunlight begins to break through, dappled and warm. By mid-morning, the abbey is fully awake, though never noisy. Bells mark the hours with calm authority. Each ring reminds the brothers to lift their minds toward prayer, even if only for a heartbeat. In the kitchen, broth simmers. In the gardens, hands weed and harvest. In the workshop, wood shavings curl as a craftsman planes a board for some new bench or reliquary. The life here isn't it idle but deeply peaceful. Visitors arrive now and then. A weary traveler seeks bread and water at the gate and is welcomed by the porter, a kindly man who asks no questions beyond need. A poor woman comes for a remedy of herbs. The infirmarian listens and measures dried leaves into a pouch with gentle care. They go as quietly as they came, grateful and unburdened. The Abbey gives what it had without pride. Before noon, the bell call again. The brothers gather once more in the church for a short prayer, voices rising in a low tide of chant. Sunlight now pours through the high windows, turning dust to gold and catching the edges of simple wooden stalls. When they sing, the sound seems to lift upward into that light, as though the stones themselves breathe with them. Dinner follows, the day's largest meal. It is still simple vegetable stew, bread, perhaps fish if the river has been kind, but shared with quiet gratitude. Again a brother reads while the others eat, telling of holy men and women, or of wisdom from the ancient fathers. Sometimes the reading is history or natural law to feed the mind as the body is fed. The meal ends with thanks, and the hall empties once more into purposeful silence. The afternoon passes in gentle work. In the orchard, fruit is gathered into baskets. In the workshop, a monk repairs harness and sandals for the house. Bees drone in the garden while herbs are cut and tied for drying. The scriptorium glows brighter now as light floods its tall windows. The brothers there labor steadily, their faces serene, their hands sure. Children from the nearby village may appear at the gate bringing eggs or grain as tithe. The porter greets them kindly, giving a blessing or a sweet word of encouragement. Sometimes he hands out a small loaf for the walk home. The Abbey is a refuge and a steady friend to those who live within its shadow. By late afternoon, the pace slows. Some brothers retreat to the cloister for study or prayer, sitting with books on cool stone benches. Others walk the garden paths, rosaries slipping quietly through their fingers. Birds wheel overhead in gentle arcs. The hum of bees softens as evening cool begins to gather. The Abbey seems to breathe more slowly, savoring the day's peace before it yields to night. When the bell for Vespers rings, the light is golden and slanting. The brothers return to the church, habits brushing stone, sandals whispering. Candles are lit, their flames dancing in the growing dusk. The chant begins low and deep, filling the vaulted space with calm gravity. Psalms rise and fall like the tide. Prayers for the world beyond these walls mingle with thanks for the simple gifts of the day. After Vespers, the evening meal is spare bread, a little fruit, broth to warm the stomach. Conversation is still absent. The Abbey holds its silence tenderly. When the abbot blesses the table, heads bow and the quiet meal begins and ends with equal peace. Shadows lengthen in the refectory, lanterns glimmer along the walls. Night closes gently. Brothers walk the cloister in pairs or alone, praying under stars just beginning to show. The scriptorium is dark now. Tools are put away, parchments covered. Gardens grow still except for the whisper of night wind through leaves. The porter closes the gate and bars it softly, ensuring the Abbey's rest. Compline, the last prayer of the day, gathers all once more in the church. Candles glow warm against the stone, and the air smells of wax and cool earth. The chant is softer now, lullaby-like, a final offering before sleep. Into your hands, O Lord, we commend our spirit, the voices say, and the silence after is as deep as the night beyond the walls. When the final bell sounds, each brother bows and departs in quiet. Lanterns guide them back to the dormitory, where beds await, simple and welcoming. Sandals are set aside, habits loosened. Sleep comes quickly to those who have lived a day of steady prayer and honest work. The Abbey falls still, a haven wrapped in darkness and peace. Outside, the stars burn clear above the ancient roof. The river murmurs softly beyond the fields, and the wind carries faint scents of bread, herbs, and cooling stone. The Abbey dreams with its monks, timeless and serene, waiting for the next dawn when the bell will call again. The Scriptorium is a long, high chamber tucked along the south side of the cloister, where the sun pour its light across rows of narrow desks. Its air smells of parchment and ink, beeswax and faint herbs hung to keep moths away. Even before dawn has fully broken, candles burn here in small pools of gold, but soon they will be extinguished as daylight grows. It is a place of stillness and care, where words and images take quiet shape beneath patient hands. Monks file in without hurry, habits whispering on the worn stone floor. Each bows briefly toward the crucifix at the far end before taking his accustomed seat. A few exchange small nods of greeting, but no one speaks. The day's first light filters through tall windows of plain glass, striking the wooden desks where tools already wait. Quills trimmed fine, knives for scraping mistakes, brushes for laying gold leaf. Brother Ulrud the Armarius, who oversees this work, moves between desks, checking supplies. His eyes are keen but kind, hands clasped behind his back as he pauses to advise or adjust. He examines an inkpot here, a parchment sheet there, ensuring no flaw will mar the day's labors. His voice, when it comes, is soft enough not to disturb the quiet, but firm with long habit. A word of praise, a note of correction. Soon the scratching of quills begins, a soft whisper like wind stirring dry grass. Black ink flows along smooth calfskin sheets, forming the elegant letters of scripture and hymn. Some brothers write with practiced speed, each stroke steady and true. Others move more slowly, tongue caught between teeth in concentration, shaping each letter as though carving it from air. Mistakes are rare but not feared. A sharp knife scrapes gently, leaving the parchment smooth for a fresh attempt. At one table near the light, an illuminator works not with words but with color. Brother Martin grinds pigments in a small mortar, lapis from distant lands for blue, malachite for green, oak gall mixed with iron for deep black. He hums softly, barely audible, as he blends powders with egg yolk or glare to make his paints. Beside him, tiny brushes rest on a strip of linen, each ready for its delicate task. When his paints are ready, Martin bends over his page, where a capital letter has been sketched faintly in lead. He traces it first with fine black lines, then fills its loops with vivid color. Leaves unfurl, birds stretch their wings, small vines curl and weave between letters. Bit by bit, the page transforms from simple text into something luminous, alive with pattern and meaning. Elsewhere, Brother Anselm copies a psalter, his script flowing in steady, narrow lines. Each word is measured to fit the page, just so. No waste of space, no cramped errors. He pauses often to sharpen his quill, holding it to the candlelight to judge the cut. When a letter pleases him, he nods faintly, though no one sees. The act itself is enough reward. The room grows lighter as morning advances. Candles are snuffed one by one, leaving only daylight spilling across the desks. Dust motes dance in the beams, caught and turned to gold. Outside, the cloister guard hums with bees, but here the only sound is the scratch of pens and the occasional sigh. It is a world apart, timeless, where each moment is devoted to thought made visible. On a central table lie finished books, drying beneath smooth wooden boards. Their pages gleam faintly with fresh ink, and some bear gilded initials that catch the light like small suns. These volumes will soon be bound in leather, their spines tooled with careful hands. Some are destined for this very abbey, others will travel to distant houses or to patrons who support the monk's quiet craft. Mid-morning brings a pause. The bell sounds softly from the church, and the brothers set down their pens. Hands are flexed, shoulders rolled to ease long hours of stillness. They walk the cloister for a few minutes, breathing fresh air and stretching legs grown numb. Conversation is still minimal, but small smiles pass between them, signs of fellowship that need few words. When work resumes, a gentle rhythm returns. Alred moves among the desks again, correcting a slant here, praising a sure hand there. He carries with him a small book of exemplars, showing the younger monks how to form certain letters or ornaments. Each lesson is given patiently. The goal is its speed but quiet mastery. Brother Martin have laid his colors, now turns to gold. He opens a thin book of leaf, each sheet gleaming fragile and impossibly light. Holding his breath, he lifts one piece with a soft brush and settles it over the gesso he laid yesterday. The gold clings as if by magic. He smooths it with a dog's tooth burnisher until it shines like morning sun. Around the room, a few brothers glance up, silently admiring the skill. A new visitor enters quietly, a lay brother carrying fresh sheets of parchment from the tanner. He bows slightly and leaves them on a side table. The smell of the treated skins mingles with ink and wax, rich and faintly sweet. Soon these too will bear words of prayer and learning, but for now they rest, pale and waiting. Outside the windows, the day grows warm. Sunlight brightens to silver on the glass, and the garden below stirs with life. Birds sing, bees drift, and a distant bell rings from a village far off. Yet inside, calm holds. The work goes on, one line, one flourish at a time, each a quiet offering of mind and hand. At noon the bell call all to prayer and dinner. Quills are cleaned and set aside. Ink pots are corked, pigments covered. The brothers wash their hands at a stone basin near the door, the cool water darkening their sleeves. In single file they move out, sandals soft on stone, leaving the scriptorium to its empty light and scent of parchment. The refectory meal is simple but filling. Bread, vegetable stew, perhaps a bit of cheese. Again the reader's voice fills the hall, though today's passage tells of wisdom gathered from distant lands, herbal lore, the motion of stars, a saint's travels. The monks eat in peace. minds still half turned toward the words they have just copied. After the meal and a brief rest, they return to their desks. The room has grown warm, a few windows are unlatched to admit soft breeze. Pages flutter slightly, but the work continues undisturbed. Brother Anselm now illuminates his margins with red flourishes, while Martin, satisfied with gold, paints tiny creatures amid vines. A deer, a bird, even a whimsical dragon peering from behind a letter. Mistakes still happen. Aelred notices a blot where a younger monk's quill has slipped. Calmly he shows how to scrape and smooth the parchment, how to dry and rewrite without leaving scar or shadow. The novice blushes, but smiles in relief, grateful for patient teaching. Each page is a journey, and all here understand that mastery grows slowly, like ivy climbing stone. As afternoon light slants golden across the desks, the room feels almost dreamlike. Dust motes drift like stars, quills scratch softly, brushes whisper. Some brothers pray silently as they work, their lips moving without sound. Others hum faintly, tunes as old as the Abbey itself. Time stretches, not idle but serene, each hour a gift shaped into letters and color. Visitors sometimes step inside quietly, a traveler guided by the porter, a young noble seeking a commissioned book. They tread lightly, awed by the hush and the steady industry. The brothers greet them with nods but do not cease their work. Aelred speaks gently, explaining the process, showing a sample page. Often the visitor leaves humbled, carrying a sense of wonder back into the noisy world beyond the cloister. Late in the day, binding begins for those books ready to leave the scriptorium. Wooden boards, leather, and fine cords are brought forth. Brother Hugo, the binder, works with slow precision, stitching gatherings together, shaping spines, pressing covers. His tools click softly, and the scent of warm hide mingles with the fading smell of ink. Soon these volumes will journey outward, bearing within them the silent labor of many hands. As the sun sinks, light grows mellow and shadows lengthen across the room. One by one, monks finish their lines, lift their heads, and stretch stiff fingers. Quills are cleaned and knives sheathed. Pigments are covered to keep their colors pure. Martin closes his small boxes of gold and blue with care, as if tucking jewels to sleep. The bell call again, summoning them to Vespers. They rise, some rubbing their necks, others flexing weary hands, but all with a quiet contentment. The day's work may have been slow and exacting, but it is good work, a prayer offered in shape and hue. As they file out, the last light gleams off gilded pages, casting tiny flickers across the darkening room. Evening prayer follows, candles glowing, voices lifting once more in chant. Afterward there is a simple meal, then the gentle hush of night. The scriptorium stands empty now, its desks orderly, its air still fragrant with ink and parchment. Moonlight will soon silver the windows, touching pages left to dry under smooth boards. Tomorrow the room will wake again to the soft whisper of quills, the grinding of pigments, the patient shaping of letters. But tonight it sleeps, a quiet heart within the Abbey, dreaming of words yet to be written and images yet to bloom. Behind the abbey high stone walls lies a garden as old as the house itself, a place both practical and deeply peaceful. It is enclosed on all sides, yet open to the sky, a quiet square of earth and green surrounded by low cloister walks. Here monks have worked the soil for generations, coaxing herbs and fruits, vegetables and flowers from the land with patience and prayer. The air smells of damp earth and rosemary. Bees hum softly, and the only other sound is the slow footstep of a brother tending his rose. At dawn, Brother Petrus is the first to enter. He is a broad-shouldered man with gentle eyes and soil always beneath his nails. Carrying a wooden rake, he pauses at the threshold to bow his head in brief prayer. Then he steps among the beds, breathing the cool morning air that smells of mint and dew. He checks the night's work of weather and beasts, a fallen beanpole, a slug on a cabbage leaf, a scatter of petals where the wind was rough. The garden is laid out in careful order. Nearest the cloister doors are the healing herbs, sage and thyme, yarrow, mint, and feverfew. Their scents rise with the warming sun, filling the air with a mingled sweetness and sharpness. Beyond them stretch rows of vegetables for the kitchen, cabbages, leeks, beans, climbing poles, and broad plots of greens. At the far side grow fruit trees, apple and pear, their trunks gnarled and strong, their branches heavy with promise when the season is right. In one sunny corner stand the beehives, straw skeps neatly arranged. Bees drift lazily at first, then busier as the day warms, their hum steady and comforting. Brother Petrus greets them quietly, lifting the lids just enough to check their work. He moves slowly, respectful of their order, for he has tended them many years and knows their moods. The honey they make will sweeten the abbey's bread and soothe the throats of the sick. A little path of worn stone runs through the center of the garden. Along it stands a simple fountain, its water fed by a hidden spring. The gentle trickle sings as it falls into the mossy basin, keeping the air cool and fresh. Birds come here often, splashing and sipping before flitting to the trees. Sometimes a monk will pause here in silent prayer, letting the sound of water carry his thoughts heavenward. Soon other brothers join Petrus. Some come with baskets to gather herbs for the infirmary, lavender to calm the heart, chamomile to ease sleep, fennel for troubled stomachs. Brother Aelric, the infirmarian, kneels among the beds with quiet expertise, murmuring thanks as he cuts each sprig. Others arrive from the kitchen, cheerful in their simple tasks, gathering leeks and beans for the day's pottage. Work here is light-hearted yet reverent, for tending earth feels close to tending prayer. The garden is never hurried. Each task has its rhythm, the slow turning of soil, the measured cutting of herbs, the gentle tying of bean vines to stakes. Birds sing from the orchard, bees drone contentedly. Sunlight filters through the apple leaves, dappling hoods and shoulders. No one shouts, no tool strikes harshly. Even the weeds are pulled with patient hands, roots shaken free of earth before being set aside for compost. Petrus moves among the workers, offering quiet advice. He shows a novice how to pinch back mint so it grows thick and sweet, and how to test when a pear is ready by the slight give beneath its skin. When a young brother struggles with a stubborn clod, Petrus simply kneels beside him and helps loosen it with calm strength. In the garden, teaching comes gently, by example more than words. Near midday, the kitchen bell rings faintly, calling for fresh herbs. A pair of brothers hurry back along the cloister with baskets brimming parsley, thyme, chervil, and a few leaves of savory. The cook will use them to flavor the noon meal, and the scent will drift back through the cloister soon enough, mingling with the earthy sweetness of the garden. By this time the sun is high, and warmth settles over the beds. Bees are busy now, darting and humming. Butterflies drift from blossom to blossom. The brothers wipe sweat from brows, but do not complain. A jug of cool water waits in the shade of the fountain, and they drink from a shared wooden cup before returning to their rows. The air shimmers faintly with heat, but the garden feels sheltered, blessed by its old walls and the slow care given it. Sometimes visitors come to the garden. A sick villager sent by the porter may wait on a bench while Alaric gathers remedies. He moves quietly, explaining the use of each leaf or root: comfrey for bruises, calendula for wounds, mint for fevers. The villager listens, eyes wide at the learning held in this simple square of earth. When they leave with their bundle, gratitude shows in every line of their face. Children from the nearby village sometimes help in harvest season. They arrive shy but soon laugh as they gather apples into baskets or carry armfuls of beans. The monks welcome them kindly, showing how to pick without bruising fruit, how to shake bees from clover gently. The garden becomes lively then, filled with soft laughter and the scent of ripening fruit. After the noon meal, the garden rests in quiet. Most brothers return to study or scriptorium. Petrus alone stays among the beds. He sits beneath a pear tree and mends a broken handle or sharpens a small knife. Bees still hum, but they seem slower in the heat. Sometimes he prays, sometimes he simply breathes, content in the nearness of growing things. Later, when the sun begins to fall, the garden wakes again. Brothers return to water the rose, carrying buckets from the fountain, or turning the hidden channels that guide water to the roots. The smell of damp earth rises sweet and cool. Birds call as they settle for the night. The hives quiet as bees return home, heavy with pollen. The day's harvest is carried to the kitchen in wicker baskets, herbs tied in fragrant bundles, greens glistening from a final rinse, apples shining faintly in the low light. The cook greets each load with a nod and a smile, knowing the meal will be good and simple, flavored with care. When Vespers bell tolls, work ceases. Tools are cleaned and hung on pegs. Watering cans are emptied. Petrus lingers a moment, looking over the rows with quiet pride. Here is order, but not harsh order, life within gentle bounds, like prayer that shapes without stifling. He bows his head briefly before following the others back to the cloister. As dusk falls, the garden changes mood. The warm scents grow richer, mint and thyme releasing fragrance as the air cools, apples sweet on the branch. Crickets begin to sing in hidden corners. The fountain trickles on, catching the first stars in its shallow pool. Though no one remains, the place seems alive with memory, the prayers of hands that worked and tended all day long. By nightfall, the walls hold a soft darkness broken only by moonlight. The hives are still, the trees whisper faintly in the breeze. It is a safe, calm darkness, kind that shelters rather than threatens. Within the abbey the brothers sleep, but the garden keeps its own watch, guarding the simple promise of food and healing for the days ahead. Tomorrow it will wake again with Petrus's slow footsteps, the whisper of his rake, the hum of bees. Year after year, season after season, it will feed and heal and comfort, a living prayer of soil and hands and quiet faith. The day in the Abbey has been long but unhurried, filled with work and prayer, meals and small kindnesses. Now the sun is sinking beyond the fields, and a hush begins to gather like a slow tide. The bell in the tower tolls a single low note, rolling over the cloisters and gardens, calling the brothers to evening prayer. Lanterns flicker to life along the covered walks as sandals whisper toward the great church. In the nave, shadows stretch long across the worn flagstones. Candles glow in steady rows, their flames small but sure against the deepening dusk. The air smells of cool stone, beeswax, and the faint green breath of the garden carried in by evening breeze. One by one, monks enter and bow before taking their stalls in the choir. They come without haste, yet none linger. The rhythm of this hour is well known to all. Vespers begins with a single voice, low and resonant. Another joins, then another, until the whole choir breathes the psalms together. The sound is deep and warm, rising like incense toward the dark rafters above. No note is forced, no word hurried. It is music shaped by centuries, meant not to dazzle, but to soothe and lift hearts heavenward as night approaches. Outside the high windows, the last gold of sunset fades to violet. Birds settle in the eaves. The first bats flit against the glowing sky. Inside, the chant flows on, timeless and unbroken. The abbot leads the prayers with quiet strength, his voice neither louder nor softer than any other, yet steady as a bell. When the Magnificat is sung, the brothers stand, their habits swaying gently as they lift their hearts with merry song. When the final psalm ends, silence holds for a breath before the abbot gives the blessing. A deep Amen answers, and the service closes without applause or fanfare, only calm gratitude. The monks file out again, candles in hand to light the cloister's darkening paths. Outside, night has deepened. The first stars shimmer faintly above the abbey roof. The refectory glows with soft lantern light as the evening meal is shared. It is a simple supper, bread baked this morning, a thin broth fragrant with herbs from the garden, a few apples sliced and passed along the table. The reader's voice is absent tonight. Vespers has filled the need for words. The meal is eaten in silence, each monk savoring the quiet as much as the food. After supper, bowls and boards are cleaned with efficient care. Brothers move gently about their tasks, no sound louder than the clink of pottery or the faint rush of water from the kitchen cistern. Laughter is rare but not forbidden. Sometimes a small smile passes between friends, a wordless gladness for the day shared. When all is done, the abbey settles further. Some brothers return to the cloister walks, pacing slowly beneath the lanterns as they pray the rosary. Others visit the garden one last time to breathe the cool night air. The fountain trickles softly, and the scent of damp herbs mingles with distant wood smoke. The hives are silent now. Bees rest after their day's labor. The church doors remain open for a little while longer, inviting private prayer. A few monks slip inside to kneel alone before the altar. Candles burn steadily, their light gilding the stone and wood in gentle gold. Shadows sway on the walls as the flames tremble. These last moments before full night are cherished. Time to speak heart to God in solitude, to lay down worries before sleep. At last the bell tolls again, softer now, a call to Compline, the final prayer. All gather once more in the church, but the mood is changed from Vespers. If Vespers is a warm sunset, Compline is a quiet lullaby. The chant is low, tender, and brief. Psalms of trust, prayers for safety in the dark hours ahead. Into your hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit, they sing, and the words seem to settle over every stone. When the last note fades, the abbot sprinkles holy water down the rows, blessing each brother. Heads bow, a faint sigh of peace ripples through the gathered men. Then the candles are carried out, and the church darkens behind them, left with only the steady glow of the sanctuary lamp. The cloisters now are quiet but alive with soft light. Lanterns sway gently in the night breeze. Their golden circles of illumination pool on the flagstones. Monks walk in twos or alone, heading back to the dormitory or lingering for one more silent prayer. No speech breaks the calm, only the sound of sandals and the whisper of robes. Stars wheel above the abbey roof, brilliant now in the deep night. The air is cool and smells of damp earth and herbs. Somewhere an owl calls softly from the orchard. Somewhere else a door closes with a muffled thud. The porter makes his final round, checking gates and locks, moving with the ease of long habit. When he is satisfied, he bows briefly toward the church and retires. Inside the dormitory, beds await in quiet rows. Brothers undress in silence, fold habits neatly, and slip beneath simple woolen blankets. A few read by candle for a short while, small prayer books held close, then snuff the flame and settle. Others kneel briefly at their beds before lying down. One by one the room fills with the soft sound of breathing. The abbey itself seems to sleep now. The scriptorium lies dark, its quills cleaned and laid aside. The garden rests under silver moonlight. The refectory is empty, but still smells faintly of bread and herbs. Only the sanctuary lamp burns on, a small flame keeping watch through the hours until dawn. Beyond the walls, the fields grow pale with starlight. A stream glimmers faintly as it winds past orchard and meadow. Villages nearby have long gone to their beds, comforted by the sight of the abbey's steady tower against the sky. Its bell is silent for now, but its presence alone is enough to promise safety and prayer. Deep night holds the abbey gently. Its silence is it empty but full of faith, of work well done, of lives given to prayer and service. The stars wheel on, the lamp burns quietly, and within, The brothers rest in the great stillness they have sought all day. The peace here feels older than stone, older even than song, a quiet that carries through centuries and cradles all who surrender to it. When the first faint light touches the horizon, the bell will wake and call again. But for now, night reigns, soft, safe, and filled with a listening silence. It is a silence that comforts, a silence that blesses, a silence that whispers of rest deeper than sleep. At the edge of a great abbey, beyond the cloister where monks walk in silent prayer, lies the Scriptorium. It is a grand hall, but a long, low room with tall, arched windows that drink the light. In morning it glows pale gold, at night it softens to the warm breath of oil lamps. Here words are born into new life, scratched and brushed onto parchment for those who will come long after. Before dawn the room waits, still and cool. The desks stand in ordered rows, each with a sloped board, an inkhorn, and knives for scraping errors. Quills rest bundled in earthen pots. Shelves hold neat stacks of parchment, creamy calfskin sheets, smooth to the touch. Along one wall are pigments, small covered bowls of red, blue, green, and gold leaf for initials and illuminations. The air smells faintly of vellum, beeswax, and smoke from last night's lamps. Brother Alaric is first to enter. He moves quietly, his wool robe whispering against stone. He lights the first lamps, though the sky is just turning pale. His hands are stained faintly with ink, e'en when clean. His fingers know the weight of a quill better than a sword or plough. He opens the windows to the cool dawn air, then checks each desk, trimming quills, topping inkpots, setting out knives and pumice. Preparation is its own prayer. Soon others come. Brother Matthew, young and earnest, Brother Simon, older, with poor eyes but steady hands, two novices who will grind pigments and fetch water. They greet each other softly, a murmured pax. The abbot himself passes through, blessing their day's labor, then goes on. A hush settles as the sun climbs and light spills across the wooden boards. Work begins. Alaric starts a new copy of the Psalter. He rules faint red lines on the parchment with a sharp stylus, guiding each future word. Matthew works beside him on a treatise of Aristotle, imported from far lands and much desired by scholars. Simon illuminates a half-finished page with curling vines and birds, his brush so fine it trembles with each breath. The novices grind lapis into blue dust, stirring it into egg yolk to make paint of heaven's color. The only sounds are small and soothing, the soft rasp of quills, the faint swish of brushes, the occasional sigh of parchment being turned. Now and then a knife whispers as it scrapes away a tiny error, leaving the sheet smooth again. Birds sing faintly outside. Somewhere in the abbey a bell rings the hour. Time here feels deep and unhurried. Light is precious. Desks are turned toward the tall windows and monks shift with the sun. On cloudy days the room dims and more lamps are lit. Their smoke smells faintly of beeswax and oil. Still eyes strain. More than one brother wears a small lens of polished glass, holding it carefully to magnify tiny letters. At mid-morning, a pause comes. The novices bring bread and weak ale. Work stops for a few quiet bites. They stretch stiff fingers, roll shoulders, and whisper bits of news. A new guest in the Abbey, rumors of distant scholars seeking rare texts. Then, refreshed, they return to the page. Alaric's quill moves steadily, forming letters small and even. In principio creavit Deus caelum et terram. He murmurs the words as he writes, each syllable a thread stitching meaning to page. Matthew copies dense lines of logic, paused to check unfamiliar terms, his brow furrowed but bright with learning. Simon dips gold leaf into a glue of honey and gum, laying it gently so it gleams like dawn. From time to time, a master of books visits Brother Hugo, keeper of the library. He examines progress, corrects the spelling, nods approval. He speaks little but carries a sense of weight. Knows which book might save a soul, guide a mind, or outlive kings. His presence reminds them that their labor is more than craft. It is memory and faith made visible. Outside, the Abbey hums with other life. Gardens tended, bells rung, guests welcomed, prayers sung. But here the world narrows to ink and page. The brothers lose themselves in the slow river of letters, where each stroke matters and nothing can be hurried. Mistakes are gently scraped and rewritten. Patience is virtue in every line. Near noon, the light is strongest. The windows blaze with sun, and colors leap to life on Simon's page. A bluebird perched in a golden vine, red flowers curling around a capital letter. Even the novices pause to admire before returning to grind more pigment. Dust motes dance like tiny stars in the warm beams. Then the bell for dinner sounds. Work stops, quills are wiped and laid down, covers placed over inks. The brothers wash hands darkened with stain and file silently to the refectory. Conversation is it for meals, but they eat with quiet satisfaction. Coarse bread, cheese, stew of beans and greens. Some think of their pages even as they chew, seeing letters in their mind's eye. After dinner comes a brief walk in the cloister. Their stretched limbs feel sunlight, breathe garden air heavy with herbs. Conversation is low and gentle. Alaric speaks softly with Mathieu about Aristotle's arguments. Simon shows a sprig of plant whose curling leaves will guide tomorrow's vine work. These minutes of simple fellowship sustain them for the long, quiet hours ahead. Work resumes until dusk. The light slants and warms. Shadows lengthen across desks. Lamps are lit one by one, golden pools against the growing blue outside. The rhythm slows but continues. A novice carries warm sand to dry pages. Another polishes finished sheets with pumice to smooth them. The air fills with the scent of oil and the faint sound of brushes washing in water bowls. By late evening, the day's labors are gathered. Alaric has filled several new leaves with steady script. Matthew has mastered a difficult passage and grins quietly at his neat columns. Simon's illumination glows with gold and color like a garden in eternal bloom. The abbot returns to bless the work, touching each page with a gentle hand and murmured prayer. They clean carefully. Quills are sharpened and placed in pots, knives wiped and sheathed. Inks are covered to keep from drying. Finished pages are stacked flat beneath smooth boards to keep them true. Desks are dusted of stray vellum shavings. The room, once alive with subtle sound, grows hushed again. Before leaving, Alaric pauses at the window. Outside, dusk has deepened to quiet night. The cloister glows faintly with lanterns. He breathes the cool air and feels a deep peace. The day's work will outlive him, carrying words across generations. Somewhere far away, a student may one day read the very lines he copied and find light. That thought is enough. The brothers file out softly, their sandals whispering on stone. Lamps are lowered, shutters drawn against damp. The scriptorium sleeps, smelling faintly of parchment and wax, with its secrets safe in tidy stacks. In the dormitory, as they settle into narrow beds, Alaric's ink-stained hands rest easy. Tomorrow will bring more pages, more patient letters, more silent hours. It is slow, unseen work, yet powerful, a bridge across space built by careful strokes. Outside, stars rise above the Abbey roofs. The scriptorium lies dark but not forgotten. Its silence hums with all that was written today and all that will be written tomorrow, keeping knowledge alive while the night drapes the world in peace. At the far edge of the university quarter stands the library, largest and most revered of the town's houses of learning. Its walls are thick stone, its windows tall and arched to catch every scrap of daylight. To approach it is to step from the busy streets of merchants and scholars into a hush that seems to breathe knowledge. The carved doors are heavy oak, bound with iron, their panels worked with vines and letters. Students passing through lower lanes glance but with quiet longing. Here are the treasures they hope one day to touch. Morning light strikes the library's roof first. Frost on its tiles glimmers pale gold. Within, the great hall is already stirring. Brother Hugo, master of books, unlocks the doors and moves through the aisles, lamp in hand. He checks shutters, trims wicks, and opens the tall windows to the crisp air. The smell is like no other. Parchment and leather, beeswax and old wood, a faint spice of ink. Dust motes drift where the light falls. Rows of desks stretch beneath the timbered roof. Each is set with slanted board, sand shaker, and sometimes a chained inkwell. Chains, too, hold many books, thick volumes fastened to rods so they may be read but not removed. Shelves rise high along the walls, filled with manuscripts, some plain, some painted with bright initials in gold. In alcoves sit globes, astrolabes, and small boxes of minerals or dried plants, aids for study. Soon the first scholars arrive. They walk softly, cloaks drawn close, carrying their own tools, quills, ink, wax tablets. Some greet Hugo quietly, others nod and go straight to their accustomed desks. A few remove boots to pad more gently across the floor, out of respect for the silence. Each chooses a seat near needed light or desired volume. A young student named Agnes enters, carrying notes from last night's disputation. She bows to Hugo and asks leave to consult Aristotle's De Anima. He smiles faintly and leads her to a high shelf, where the book waits bound in dark leather. Its chain rattles softly as he sets it on a desk. Agnes thanks him and bends over the pages, already lost in thought. Nearby, Martin studies a collection of Roman law, copying clauses carefully onto parchment he has begged from a wealthier friend. His brow is furrowed, his fingers ink-stained. Each phrase he writes feels like a step toward the career he dreams of. A pair of theology students sit opposite, murmuring over Augustine and occasionally sketching diagrams of the soul in the margins of wax. The library's silence is empty. It hums with soft industry. Quills scratch, pages turn with a faint sigh. Now and then a student clears a throat, or the chain of a book rattles as it is shifted. Light shifts across desks as the sun climbs, striking gold in illuminated initials. Hugo moves quietly, fetching volumes from locked presses for those he deems ready, advising on texts or mending a frayed clasp with deft hands. In a side chamber, two scribes copy rare works under his eye. They bend over great boards where parchment is pinned taut, tracing each letter with deliberate care. A novice grinds pigments for decorated initials. Another polishes dry pages with pumice to smooth them. The work is slow but vital. Each copy adds strength to the fragile chain of memory. Mid-morning brings a small ripple of sound as a visiting scholar arrives. He is a traveler from distant Bologna, here to consult a legal text not found at home. Hugo greets him warmly, checks his credentials, and leads him to the special chest where the codex lies wrapped in linen. Other students glance up with curiosity, then return to work. Strangers are not rare here, but always interesting. Sometimes a master comes to lecture among the shelves. Today, Magister Bernard enters with a cluster of students, leading them to the astronomy alcove. He shows them a great brass astrolabe, explains its use in charting stars and seasons, and directs them to Ptolemy's works chained nearby. His voice is low but carries. Soon a quiet discussion stirs among the group, punctuated by the soft clink of metal instruments. When noon bell rings from the nearby church, some scholars leave for dinner in the refectory or town taverns. Others stay, eating bread and cheese quietly at their desks. Food is allowed here only if neat and silent. Hugo patrols with a kindly but firm eye, keeping crumbs away from precious parchment. Afternoon light slants golden through high windows. Dust glows like drifting stars. The library fills again as students return from meals or other lectures. A sense of steady purpose settles. More reading, more careful notes, more slow wrestling with ancient thought. A medical student studies Gala's treatises on humors. A young cleric traces genealogy for a sermon. In a far corner, a poet drafts lines inspired by Ovid, hiding them under legal notes when footsteps approach. Occasionally, laughter bubbles softly when two friends share a sly comment or marvel at a strange diagram. But voices stay hushed. The library's calm is never broken. Its peace is as much part of learning as the books themselves. As evening nears, candles are lit one by one. Their light pools warm on the desks, turning parchment to gold. Outside, town bells call curfew, but the library remains open until the last glow of day fades. Students hurry to finish notes, copy final passages, or beg Hugo for just one more look at a guarded volume. He is stern but understanding, often granting a few extra minutes to the earnest. At last Hugo calls the close. He walks the aisles gently but firmly, asking scholars to put away tools. Quills are cleaned, wax smoothed, books returned and locked or left chained in place. Chains clink softly as volumes are lowered to their rests. Candles are snuffed except for a few kept for Hugo's rounds. The scholars file out, some stretching cramped fingers, others still debating what they have read. Agnes leaves with a light in her eyes, Martin with more notes than parchment to hold them. They step back into the cool night, their minds heavy with thought, yet alive with new fire. When the doors close, the library exhales into silence. Hugo makes one last walk through the rows, touching spines, checking locks, whispering a small prayer for wisdom preserved. He leaves the great key on a hook and blows out the final lamp. In the dark, the books sleep but do not die. They hold centuries of voices waiting to speak. Philosophers, poets, jurists, physicians, saints. Tomorrow light will pour through the tall windows, and new hands will turn these pages. The road of learning runs quiet and long, and here it rests for the night, safe and ready. In a narrow lane not far from the university's main square, a crooked timber house leans gently over the street. Its upper stories jut above the stones, their windows tiny and uneven. Smoke curls from a crooked chimney, a lantern sways above the door. This is a lodging house for scholars, plain and draughty but filled with life. Here students from distant shires and cities dwell while they chase learning, living together in noisy, hopeful fellowship. Morning comes slowly in such a place. First, the smell of bread drifts from a baker nearby. Then the lane stirs with the sound of hooves and vendors setting up stalls. Inside, the house creaks as students shift in straw pallets or narrow cots. Some mutter half-dreamed Latin phrases, others groan at the cold. The stairs creak as someone steals down early to warm a mug of beer at the kitchen hearth. The house belongs to Dame Beatrice, a widow sharp of tongue but kind of heart. She keeps order among her unruly boarders, collects rent, scolds those who forget curfew, and brews a great pot of porridge every morning. Her cat, a large striped beast, reigns over the hearth and swats at any who try to steal food. Beatrice's own son once studied here. Now she tends to others' sons and a few daughters so they may seek wisdom. The rooms are plain. Each student has a small wooden chest, a straw mattress, and perhaps a single shelf for books if they can afford them. Walls are plaster patched with lime wash. Beams creak when the wind blows. Candles are precious, so nights are dim, but the mornings catch light through small oiled parchment panes. The smell of ink and wool cloaks lingers with smoke and bread. On this day, a young scholar named Martin wakes late. He is a merchant's son from a distant city, here to study law. His roommate, Etienne, is already at, grinding ink in a small stone mortar and muttering through notes from yesterday's lecture. Martin scrambles to dress, pulling on his plain gown and hood. They argue briefly about whose turn it is to fetch water, then laugh and hurry down the stairs. The common room is small but warm. Beatrice ladles porridge thick with barley into wooden bowls. Other students gather. Agnes, a quick-witted girl from Flanders studying medicine. Thomas, a quiet one destined for holy orders. 3 brothers from a rural manor who bicker constantly but share one set of wax tablets between them. Conversation is lively, complaints about the cold, gossip of a master's rumored absence, plans for disputation practiced later. After eating, they scatter for the day's lectures. Some hurry out the door still fastening cloaks, others linger to quiz one another on yesterday's logic. Beatrice shows them with mock severity. She wants her hearth clear before she scrubs. The lane fills with young voices as they join the flow of scholars toward the university halls. By afternoon, the house grows quiet. Only a few remain, those copying notes, the ill, or a visiting tutor paid by wealthier students for private instruction. Today, Agnes has returned early to study medicine texts with a traveling physician who rents a corner of the kitchen. Their low voices blend with the cat's purr and the sound of Beatrice chopping onions for supper. When evening comes, the house fills again. Students stomp in, boots muddy, faces bright with ideas or weary from long hours. Some argue fiercely about Aristotle. Others complain about the cold lecture hall or praise a master's clarity. Cloaks are hung to dry near the hearth, and the common room fills with smoke, laughter, and the scent of stew. Beatrice serves a simple meal. Bread, beans, bits of pork if coin allowed, cabbage from a neighbor's garden. Students crowd the benches, bowls in hand, trading stories and notes. A new arrival from distant Spain is introduced, halting in the local tongue but smiling. Tomas says grace, and they eat with gusto. After supper, study resumes in earnest. Candles are shared, each flame carefully guarded from draughts. Students hunch over wax tablets, reading by dim light. Someone copies a borrowed text word for word, careful what to blot precious parchment. Others rehearse disputation, challenging each other with quar and respondio dicendum quod, until laughter breaks their solemn play. Martin and Etienne share a corner, reviewing the day's lecture on Roman law. Agnes pores over a borrowed medical scroll, lips moving silently as she traces diagrams of veins. The brothers from the manor snore on a bench, exhausted. The new Spaniard listens and takes careful notes, though he understands little. Soon he will speak better. Outside, the lane grows quiet save for distant tavern songs and the clatter of hooves. Inside, the house smells of wax, ink, and stew. The fire burns low but steady. Beatrice moves among the lodgers, checking candles, offering a second ladle of broth to one, a stern word to another for leaving boots in the way. Her care keeps the house from sliding into chaos. Later, a small group gathers near the hearth for lighter talk. Perrin, who studies music, strums a lute softly. Others hum along or tell tales from home, river floods, harvest feasts, a far cousin's knighthood. Laughter drifts upward with smoke. For all their striving, these are still young souls far from home, craving warmth and friendship. As night deepens, the house slowly quiets. Some finish notes and creep to bed. Others whisper by firelight, reluctant to end the day. Candles gutter low. Beatrice yawns and shoo the last lingering talkers upstairs. The cat curls tighter on the hearth. In the sleeping rooms, snores soon mingle with the creak of beams. Martin lies awake a while, mind buzzing with legal terms and arguments. Etienne is already asleep, quill stains on his fingers. From other rooms come muffled voices, someone praying softly, someone reading still. Then silence settles, gentle and complete. The house itself seems to sleep. Timbers sigh, the wind brushes at shutters, the last embers glow faint red. Beyond the small windows the town lies dark but alive, with distant bells and the hush of night streets. Tomorrow will bring new lessons, new debates, and more hard bread and porridge. Yet for now there is rest, a fragile but real peace after a day of striving. Here, in crooked lodgings held together by Dame Beatrice's care and the shared hope of students, learning takes root. The rooms are plain, the meals simple, but dreams are large. To teach, to heal, to argue before kings, to read what few have read. Sleep gathers them all, readying them for the long climb of knowledge. In the heart of a lively medieval town, among narrow streets filled with scholars and tradesmen alike, stands the new university. Its buildings are not yet grand, mostly timbered halls and borrowed churches, but they hum with learning. On a crisp autumn morning, one long hall fills with the low murmur of students gathering for a lecture. The hall is simple but dignified, whitewashed walls hung with a few tapestries against the chill, heavy beams darkened by years of smoke. Long benches face a raised chair and desk where the master will speak. Tall windows admit a pale light softened by oiled parchment panes. On the floor, rushes muffle footsteps and hold the smell of herbs against damp. A single great brazier at the back offers warmth to those who sit far from the sun. Students arrive in small knots. Some wear plain wool cloaks, patched at the elbows. Others, sons of merchants or minor lords, wear finer cloth, trimmed in modest fur. Each carries writing tools, wax tablets and styluses, or parchment and quills if they can afford ink. Their breath mists in the cool air as they find places. Voices rise and fall in Latin greetings, in hurried exchange of notes, in laughter quickly hushed. At the front, a pedal bustles an older man charged with keeping order. He sets out the master's books, thick clasped volumes of Aristotle and law, their covers dark with age. He sharpens a few quills, lays a sand shaker ready, and arranges candles to supplement weak daylight. Now and then he raps a staff lightly on the floor when students grow too loud. The noise subsides each time. Soon the master enters. Magister Bernard is a tall, spare man with keen eyes behind round spectacles. His gown is dark but well kept, a hood lined with fur against the cold. He carries a single book under one arm and greets the room with a nod. All rise briefly in respect, then settle as he climbs to the lectern. The Eadle hands him a candle lit from the brazier. Bernard sets it beside his book, opens the heavy clasp, and begins. His voice is steady and measured, the Latin clear though not rushed. Today's subject is natural philosophy, the nature of motion, of change, of the elements. He reads first from Aristotle, the ancient words sounding almost like prayer. Then he explains in his own phrasing, making signs in the air to show movement and rest. Students bend over tablets, scratching symbols and brief notes. Wax squeaks, quills whisper on parchment. Every so often, Bernard pauses to ask a question. A brave student rises, answers haltingly in Latin. The master listens with care, corrects gently, and praises good thought. Others murmur assent. The hall feels alive, not noisy but electric with shared effort. From the back, poorer scholars strain to hear, leaning forward on elbows. Nearer the front, wealthier sons sit straighter, some proud, some humbled by the challenge. Outside the windows the town bustles. Bells mark the hour, carts creak past, distant merchants shout. But inside, the rhythm of study holds. Bernard reads, explains, and sometimes debates with his own imagined opponent, answering doubts before they're voiced. Students scribble diagrams of circles and spheres to follow his points on motion. The scent of ink and wax mingles with cold autumn air. Mid-morning brings a brief pause. The Heedle passes among the benches with a jug of watered wine. Students sip, stretch, whisper. Bernard closes his book to rest his eyes. Two boys argue softly over a point, tracing lines on the wax to show meaning. A girl from Lombardy, one of the few here, sits apart but listens keenly, already ready with a question for when the master resumes. The second half of the lecture dives deeper. Bernard speaks of the heavens, of spheres turning beyond sight, of how change touches earth, but the stars move eternal. He quotes scripture where it touches learning, weaving faith and reason as the university strives to do. Some students nod, others frown in thought. It simple, but it stirs minds awake. When the hour bell from the nearby church tolls, the lecture closes. Bernard snaps the great book shut, blesses the room with a quiet phrase, and departs with the beetle trailing. For a moment the hall hums with release. Students stretch cramped legs, compare notes, and cluster in talk. A few linger at the lectern to ask questions, and Bernard answers kindly though briefly before heading to his next duty. Outside, the courtyard comes alive with departing scholars. Some hurry to the next lesson in law or medicine. Others drift to taverns for warm ale and argument. A pair of students remain under the cloister arch, debating a fine point with wax tablets flashing between them. Laughter breaks out nearby as someone misquotes a text and is corrected with good-natured teasing. Within the now empty hall, sunlight shifts through the high windows. Abandoned rushes lie scattered where feet dragged. A single wax tablet is left behind. The beetle will find it later and set it aside. Quiet settles again, broken only by the occasional crack of the brazier, yet the air still seems charged with the learning just shared, as if the words hang invisible in the beams. At midday, a different class may gather here, young clerics for theology, apprentices in civil law, students in the healing arts. Each fills the space with its own questions, its own kind of silence and wonder. The hall belongs to no single study, but to the idea of learning itself. For the young scholars, life is easy. They sleep in crowded lodgings, live on simple bread and broth, and heat wax tablets by their own breath to smooth mistakes. But here, for a few hours each day, they feel the wideness of the world. Books speak across centuries. A master's voice lifts thought beyond the town's walls. Minds stretch and grow. As dusk falls later, the hall will glow with candlelight for disputations, formal debates where students challenge and defend, learning to think with sharpness and grace. But that is another scene, another chapter. For now, the morning's quiet lecture has done its work, seeds planted in listening hearts, ready to grow into questions and new wisdom. Night will find the hall dark, but today's words will live on in the notes carried back to cold rooms, whispered over bread and ale, and remembered when these students themselves become teachers. The road of learning is long, but here, on worn benches and under slow-burning candles, it begins. Beyond the cloister garden and the kitchen yard, tucked against the shelter of the Abbey's south wall, lies the Infirmary. Its roof is low and broad, built of timber darkened by age, its windows small but bright in the pale dawn. A thin line of smoke curls from the chimney, mingling with the scent of herbs that hang drying beneath the eaves. This is where the sick and weary find rest, where quiet hands and steady hearts meet pain with patient care. Inside, the long hall is warm despite the morning chill. A hearth smolders at one end, its coals glowing faintly red. Above it, an iron pot steams with water kept hot for washing and mixing remedies. Simple beds line the walls, each with a straw mattress covered in clean linen. A few are empty, their covers folded back in readiness. Others hold sleepers who stir and sigh as the day begins. Light filters through oiled parchment panes, soft and golden. Brother Aelric, the infirmarian, enters first. He is a man of middle years, with careful hands and a face both kind and serious. A lamp swings from his belt, casting pale circles of light as he moves from bed to bed, checking each sleeper. He touches foreheads to feel for fever, adjusts blankets, and listens to the slow, even breathing of those recovering from long illness. His steps make hardly a sound on the worn boards. On a small side table stand bowls of herbs gathered yesterday, sage, chamomile, rosemary, and comfrey roots. Aelric kindles the hearth to fuller flame and adds water to the iron pot. Soon steam fills the room with its damp warmth, carrying the green, sharp scent of healing plants. He hums under his breath, no tune in particular, just a soft murmur to break the hush of early morning. A novice arrives, carrying fresh linen from the laundry. His face is sleepy but eager, his arms full of folded sheets that smell of sun and soap. Together they change the bedding of an empty cot, moving gently so as not to wake the nearest patients. Aelric teaches as he works how to smooth fabric so it does not chafe, how to tuck corners so the sick may move without strain. The boy listens, hands clumsy but improving with each task. At the farthest bed, an elderly pilgrim stirs awake. His beard is white, his skin lined by long roads and long years. Fever once burned in him, but now it has broken, leaving only weakness and a soft cough. Elric kneels beside him, offering warm water mixed with honey and thyme. The man drinks slowly, then whispers thanks in a voice rough with travel. Elric smiles and lays a cool hand on his shoulder before moving on. Not all here are travelers. A farmer lies near the hearth with a bandaged leg, broken by a fall from his cart. His sleep is deep, but not troubled. The bone has been set and bound with splints made in the Abbey workshop. Beside him, a young mother cradles her child, who suffered fever from an autumn chill. Both are asleep now, the little one's breath soft and regular. Aelric pauses to add another log to the fire, keeping the hall warm for them. The novice begins grinding dried herbs in a small mortar, guided by the infirmarian's quiet instructions. Mint and fennel for stomach aches, willow bark for pain, sage and honey for sore throats. The sound of pestle on stone is steady and comforting, mingling with the crackle of the fire. Aelric prepares a poultice of comfrey and yarrow, spreading it carefully on clean linen to wrap the farmer's injured leg later in the morning. From outside comes the faint sound of birds in the orchard and the distant echo of the morning bell calling the rest of the Abbey to prayer. The infirmary keeps its own hours. Though Aelric bows his head briefly, he does not leave his patients. Prayer here is work itself, each touch and remedy a kind of devotion. The novice whispers a short blessing as he works, shy but sincere. After the first prayers are finished, another brother arrives carrying bread and a small pot of broth from the kitchen. Breakfast in the infirmary is simple but nourishing. Elric thanks him quietly and sets the tray on a sideboard. Soon the smell of warm broth joins the herbs and wood smoke, filling the hall with comfort. The sick begin to stir more fully, waking to the soft light of day. Elric helps the elderly pilgrim sit up, propping him with pillows. He feeds him a little broth, patient with each spoonful. The farmer is woken just enough to drink. The mother, too, takes a small bowl while her child dozes in her lap. There is no hurry. Healing moves at its own pace. The novice clears away empty cups and wipes hands and faces with a warm, damp cloth, gentle as rain. Once the patients are tended, Aelric turns to the day's medicines. He checks jars on the shelves, salves of beeswax and herbs, oils steeped with rosemary, dried bundles of sage and thyme. Some must be replenished. He sends the novice to the garden for fresh mint and plantain leaves, and while waiting he writes brief notes on scraps of parchment, symptoms, progress, remedies given. His handwriting is slow but careful. Records matter, though few outside these walls will ever read them. Visitors sometimes come at mid-morning. Today it is a villager bringing her father, an old man unsteady on his feet. She guides him kindly through the door, and Aelric meets them with calm welcome. He examines the man's swollen ankle, gently asking questions. A sprain, not a break. He nods and smiles reassurance. Soon the man is resting on a cot with his foot wrapped and lifted, while the daughter sighs in relief. Aelric thanks her for bringing him early rather than letting it worsen. Meanwhile, the novice returns with fresh herbs, their scent bright in the warm hall. Together they make an infusion, boiling water poured over mint and plantain, left to steep before straining into a jug. This will cool and soothe fevered throats later, They also mix honey with powdered sage for coughs. Each action is deliberate and calm, like small prayers turned physical. Light grows stronger as the sun climbs. Through the windows falls a soft gold that turns the herbs vivid and makes the white linens glow. Outside, the abbey hums with work bells, tools, distant chant from the church. Yet here type moves gently, marked only by the needs of the sick and the quiet tasks of care. Around midday, those well enough to sit are helped outside to a sheltered bench. The fresh air is sweet with apple and mint. Bees drone lazily nearby. The old pilgrim sighs in pleasure as he feels the sun. The young mother rocks her drowsy child and smiles faintly, first smile in days. The farmer dozes, legs stretched before him, soaking warmth into healing bones. Elric and the novice eat their own meal standing in the doorway, bread with a little cheese, a cup of watered ale. They speak softly, the boy asking questions about herbs, the man answering with patient care. Between bites, Elric keeps watch on his charges, eyes gentle but alert for any sign of pain or fever. In the afternoon, more small tasks fill the hours. Bandages are changed, herbs are tied to dry for winter. Salves are stirred over the hearth so wax and oil blend smoothly. Sometimes Aelric sings under his breath, a hymn learned long ago, its tune slow and comforting. The novice hums along, shy but happy. Healing here is not only about wounds and sickness, but about creating a place where peace itself helps the body mend. Now and then a harder moment comes. A man from the town is carried in with a deep cut from a woodcutter's axe. Blood has slowed but not stopped. His face is pale. Aelric acts without panic, hands firm as he cleans the wound with warm wine, stitches it with steady skill, binds it tight with linen. The novice watches wide-eyed but doesn't falter, passing thread and salve when asked. Soon the man is resting, color slowly returning. The room absorbs the moment like deep water swallowing a stone, ripples, then calm. Later, when the sun begins to lower, the day's patients are settled once more. Some sleep deeply, lulled by warmth and care. Others sit quietly, sipping infusions, watching light fade across the herb-draped rafters. The pilgrim dozes with a peaceful smile. The farmer's breathing is slow and even. The mother hums softly to her child. Evening draws near. Aelric and the novice tidy the hall, sweeping rushes, replacing water jugs, folding spare linens. The hearth is banked so it will hold heat through the night. Jars of salve and bundles of herbs are returned to shelves, labeled in careful script. The smell of mint and honey lingers sweet and clean. Before Vespers, Aelric leads a short prayer for the sick. Those awake join softly, murmuring thanks for another day of life, strength, and gentle hands. Some make the sign of the cross, others simply close their eyes. The novice listens with shining face, perhaps understanding for the first time how healing is more than remedy. It is love made patient. When the evening bell rings across the abbey, the hall grows very quiet. Patients settle into rest. The novice lowers the lanterns so shadows lengthen but comfort remains. Aelric makes one last round, touching shoulders, tucking blankets, offering a whispered blessing at each bed. Then he closes the outer door softly and walks toward the church for prayer, leaving the infirmary wrapped in warmth and night. Outside, stars begin to prick the sky. The herb garden breathes its fragrance into the cooling air. Within the little hall, the sick sleep under the care of stillness itself, safe in the heart of the Abbey. Tomorrow the same gentle work will begin again, as it has for years, tending pain, offering peace, and keeping alive the quiet hope of healing. Behind the quiet stone walls of a medieval monastery, prayer shapes each day. Bells call to matins before dawn, to lauds as light breaks, and to the steady rhythm of work and worship that fills the hours. Among cloisters and gardens, scriptoria and chapels, there is another space, quieter still yet vital to many lives, the infirmary. Here brothers tend to their own sick, and sometimes to weary travelers, combining prayer with a learned, if still simple, craft of healing. The infirmary often lies a little apart from the main cloister, to keep noise and illness from spreading. Its long, low hall smells faintly of herbs and beeswax, clean compared to much of the outside world. Sunlight filters through high, narrow windows. Rushes or simple planks cover the floor. Rows of beds or pallets line the walls, each with blanket of undyed wool, a stool for cup or candle, and perhaps a small crucifix above. Quiet reigns except for soft moans, murmured prayers, and the shuffle of sandaled feet. The day begins early. As bells call the community to prime the infirmary, the monk in charge makes rounds. He greets each patient gently, checking fever by touch, inspecting wounds, asking after sleep and appetite. Younger brothers fetch water, sweep floors, empty night pots, and refill lamps. Light floods through narrow glass as the room wakes. After prayers and simple breakfast, often broth or pottage for patients, the healer prepares medicines. Shelves hold jars and flasks labeled in careful Latin: mel honey, vinum wine, salvia sage, rosmarinus, rosemary, pulvis court, salicis, willow bark powder, pestils grind dried leaves, mortars release sharp and pleasant scents. Wine warms on brazier to sterilize wounds or mix with herbs. Beeswax melts with oil to form soothing salves. Much of this knowledge comes from books. Monks cherish herbals, manuscripts copied lovingly, sometimes with colored drawings of plants. Works like those of Dioscorides or Hildegard of Bingen teach virtues of fennel for digestion, plantain for cuts, comfrey for bones. The infirmary reads by candlelight, cross-referencing experience with scripture and ancient wisdom. In a world where few could read, this learning feels profound. Patients are mostly fellow monks, worn by fasting or long hours of writing. But outsiders sometimes appear, pilgrims with blistered feet, peasants with festering cuts, travelers sick from strange food. The monastery offers shelter and charity. A porter may bring them to infirmary door, where healer decides if they stay. Contagious illness to frighten community. Some monasteries maintain separate plague huts far beyond main walls when pestilence comes. Treatments are gentle but practical. Fever meets cool cloths and willow bark drink. Wounds are washed with wine or brine, packed with honey or herbs to prevent rot. Stomach pains eased by mint, fennel, or caraway. Coughing brothers inhale steam of thyme and rosemary. Broken bones are splinted with wood and linen. Bloodletting is practiced, though cautiously. The infirmary believes balancing humors may restore health. Enemas with mild herbs clear stubborn ailments. Always prayer accompanies psalms sung softly as medicine given. Hygiene here surpasses much of outside world. Floors swept daily, linens, though rough, kept cleaner than peasant homes. Water flows from cistern or spring. Monks wash hands before tending sick. Food for patients is mild. Broth of herbs, barley gruel, soft bread dipped in wine. Silence is respected to allow rest. Compared to the noisy, smoky cottage, the infirmary feels peaceful. Gardens feed this work. Just beyond infirmary walls often lies a physic garden, beds of sage, rue, lavender, mint, wormwood, and more exotic plants brought by traveling monks. Bees hum among flowers, novices weed and water under watchful eye of senior brother who knows each root's virtue. Drying racks line cloister walks where herbs hang upside down in fragrant rows. The garden is both pharmacy and prayer, tending creation to heal creation. Seasons guide care. In spring, fresh greens cleanse winter's heaviness, coughs and fevers common from damp. Summer yields plenty of herbs and sees injuries from field labor and travel. Autumn means storing remedies, drying infusic, sealing jars against winter illness. Winter brings chills, lung fevers, and famine-weakened bodies. The infirmary grows crowded, fires burn bright, broth steams constantly. Beyond bodily care, monks minister to spirit. A sick brother receives confession and Eucharist. Psalms soothe sleepless nights. Pilgrims or peasants may be prayed over, blessed with relic if monastery has one. Belief that soul's peace aids body is strong. Healing blends medicine and faith. Life for the infirmary is steady but demanding. He studies when quiet, tends garden, copies recipes into neat Latin. He also comforts dying, holding hand, reading prayers, lighting candles so soul finds light. Some brothers spend decades here, humble and skilled, remembered more for mercy than miracle. Not all healing succeeds. Death visits often despite best efforts. Yet families and fellow monks find comfort that loved ones passed in clean, prayer-filled place, not alone on cottage floor. The infirmary, for all its limits, represents hope and dignity. Occasionally, wider world intrudes. Nobles seek monastic care, trusting learned monks over rough barbers. Soldiers wounded in skirmish may limp here. During plague years, desperate crowds beg entrance. Sometimes doors must close to save community. These crises test charity and caution, faith and fear. Chronicles note brothers who died serving sick, considered holy for their sacrifice. Night here is hushed and tender. Lamps glow faint along walls. Healer makes last rounds with quiet, sandaled step. He adjusts blanket, murmurs blessing, tastes cooling fever drink. Outside, bells mark Compline. Cloister falls silent but for night watch. Within infirmary, only crackle of brazier and sigh of sleepers sound. It is a sanctuary within a sanctuary. So when imagining medieval medicine, remember this calm hall, herbs drying in rafters, beeswax and wine scenting air, gentle prayers mingling with practical care. The infirmary of a monastery may lack modern science, yet it gave compassion and learning to a harsh world, tending bodies and souls alike. At the far edge of the village, where the hedgerow thickens and the lane grows narrow, a low cottage leans into the shelter of an alder tree. Its walls are of wattle and daub, lime-washed and softened by years of weather, and its thatch is patched with fresh reeds that gleam pale in the morning light. Smoke rises from a small clay-capped chimney, thin and blue, and the air around the door is fragrant with drying herbs. Bees drift lazily between the flowers that press close to the step, and a wooden charm, simple and weathered, hangs from the lintel and turns gently when the wind comes. Within lives the herb wife, a woman called Mira by the villagers, though some of the oldest still use her mother's name by mistake. She wakes before the bell in the church tower, guided by the birds and the color of the sky, and sits a moment on her bed to listen to the weather in the thatch and the creak of the alder. Her hands are lined and stained green at the nails, her hair caught back with a strip of linen. Before she stirs the hearth, she speaks a brief prayer, more habit than ceremony, asking blessing on the day's work and on those who will come to her door. The cottage opens into a single room where shadows rest pleasantly on rafters blackened by years of smoke. Bunches of herbs hang from those rafters in neat clusters, sage like soft grey tongues, fennel umbels crisp and straw-colored, lavender blue as dusk, and rosemary sprigs stiff as tiny brooms. Shelves along the walls hold earthenware jars marked in a careful hand, each tied with waxed linen, comfrey root, yarrow, poppy heads, mint, chamomile, rue. In the corner stands a wide table worn smooth by knives and pestles, its surface scattered with crumbs of bark and the dust of pounded leaves. Mera coaxes embers to flame with a twist of straw and sets a small iron pot upon the trivet. She adds a cup of well water and a pinch of rosemary, letting the steam wake the room with clean, resinous scent. Bread left from yesterday's baking warms on a flat stone by the coals, and she eats it with honey combed last week from a neighbor's hive as payment for a salve. While she eats, she unwraps a bundle of clean cloths from the chest and lays them out to air, for one never knows what the day will bring. The garden behind the cottage is the true heart of her craft. It is its grand, but it is tended with love. Narrow beds edged with river stones, paths dusted with crushed shells to keep snails away, a small willow hurdle to shield tender greens from wind. Here grow the plants she knows like kin plantains, sitting low and patient, calendars bright as little suns, mint crowding its corner with cheerful insistence, and tall angelica keeping watch in light jade towers. At the far fence, elder leans over, heavy with umbels that will later turn to berries dark as night. She takes up a willow basket lined with a clean cloth and goes out barefoot into the dew. The grass cools her soles in the morning, is full of soft sounds, bees waking with a surprised buzz, a wren disputing the hedge, a cart far off on the road. Mera harvests with restraint, pinching mint tips where the stems offer themselves, cutting comfrey leaves above the crown so the plant will return, and slipping a knife beneath calendula blooms to coax bright heads into the basket. Each cut is measured, for she keeps count in her mind of what the garden can give without misery. By the well she pauses to gather watercress for her own noon bite, then returns to the table inside, where the morning light lies pale and square across the boards. She sorts the basket into small heaps, fresh for infusions, stout-leaved for drying, blossoms for salves. The knife flickers in her hand, trimming, splitting, easing stems into bundles which she ties loosely with linen thread and hangs upon a prepared line near the hearth, where warmth will coax them dry. Some she lays upon reed mats by the window, where sun slips in like a quiet guest. Before the day grows hot, she walks to the edge of the meadow with a hooked stick and a small sack, seeking what her garden cannot furnish. There is wood betony near the old stone where sheep rub their wool, and in the dip by the brook grows meadow-sweet, its scent like clean hay with a whisper of almond. She thanks each place aloud in a voice not much louder than breath, a habit learned from her mother and never dropped. By the time the bell rings once from the distant church, her sack holds modest treasures, a few strips of willow bark, a handful of red clover heads, and a twist of wild thyme from the broken wall. When she returns, the first visitor of the day is waiting by the door, a young man shifting from foot to foot with anxiety more than pain. He shows a hand split across the palm where a tool slipped, the edges clean but gaping like the mouth of a fish. Mera guides him to the bench and pours warm water into a basin, adding a few leaves of thyme and a single drop of wine kept in a corked bottle. She bathes the cut without fuss, her hands steady as stones in the brook, and speaks to him of nothing in particular until the tremor leaves his voice. She brings out a strip of linen, a needle, and a twist of gut thread finely scraped and dried in the rafters. With 3 small stitches she closes the wound, then lays upon it a fold of linen spread with a paste of honey and ground calendula. The young man watches her with surprised calm, as if the neatness of the act has bewitched him. She binds the hand and ties the ends with a firm knot, then gives him a small packet of dried yarrow with the instruction to steep a pinch and drink if heat rises. He leaves a wedge of cheese on her table and promises to keep the hand clean. Soon after comes an older woman from the mill house, her eyes strained with sleeplessness, born of 2 small children and the grindstone's ceaseless rumble. Mera listens more than she speaks, offering a stool and cool water sweetened with a fingertip of honey. For this weariness she prepares a tisane of chamomile and a leaf of lemon balm from the pot at the door, and shows the woman how to breathe the steam with a cloth tent over her head. She sends her away with a little sack of the same, and a charm to set by the children's cradle that is really nothing but lavender bound with a blue thread. When the lane is empty again, the herbwife turns to her own workbench. She grinds dried comfrey root to a fine powder, mixing it with warmed goose fat and beeswax to make a salve smooth as cream. Into another pot she pours oil infused with rosemary sprigs that have drunk sunlight for weeks in a stoppered jar. This she strains through linen and stores for the winter aches that creep into joints when the frost begins to silver the well rope. In between she keeps her ledger, a scrap-bound set of pages where she marks not names but signs. The cartwright with the red scarf, the girl with ash-gray hair, the shepherd who smells of smoke. At midday, the sun leans hot against the thatch, and the garden buzzes like a spun hive. Mera sits in her doorway with bread and cress and a slice of apple, eating slowly while her cat curls against her feet and paws at the shadow of a bee. She closes her eyes against the brightness and listens to the village beyond, the hedgerow clack of a loom, a child's shriek, the slow creak of a wagon on the slope. She has lived long enough to know that the world will find its way to her whether she watches for it or not. A cart does indeed arrive, halting by the gap in the hedge. Two men lift down a boy who clutches his side, his face pale and shining with the sheen of fear. He fell from a hayrick, they say, and the boy nods with shame as if gravity were his fault. Mera brings him in and checks him with hands that learn by touch, ribs tender but unbroken, breath shallow but full. She brews a small cup of willow bark and meadow sweet, bitter as good medicine often is, and sweetens it with honey. While it cools, she mixes a poultice of bruised plantain and a little vinegar, and lays it where the ache burns. The boy's shoulders drop by degrees, and in an hour he is able to sit straight. She warns the men to let him rest, and not to put him to the rake for 2 days, and she knots a length of woven wool around his waist as a gentle reminder. They grumble about the hay, but thank her all the same, leaving a coil of rope as payment, because coin runs thin in summer. Mera sets the rope by the door, knowing it will serve to bind the bean frames when the wind turns wild. Afternoon is given to drying and sorting. She lifts the herbs from the lines and crumbles them between her fingers, catching the fragments in broad wooden bowls. The colors dull as they dry, but their scents sharpen. Mint like a spring opened, yarrow like clean fields after rain, sage like an old song hummed deep in the throat. She fills small parchment packets and ties them with thread, printing a neat mark on each shape of the leaf or the memory of the flower to guide her hand in dim light. A traveler stops at her gate with dust to his knees and a skin of water slapping against his hip. He asks for nothing but a moment of shade, yet Mera sees the heat in his eyes and the drift of his stance. She wedges a stool in the alder's cool and gives him nettle tea cool from the well, flavored with a sprig of mint and the thinnest curl of apple peel. He drinks and finds his voice again, speaking of the long road through dry fields and the stone bridge that sings at night when the river is low. Before he goes, he asks for something to ease the ache in his shoulders, and she rubs rosemary oil into the knots while he sits silent, as still as a dozing ox. As shadows lengthen, she tends her small still, a clay-bellied vessel set over gentle coals. From it she draws waters not strong as spirits, but scented with the memory of leaves, rose water for reddened skin, mint water to ease faintness, and a meager draught of lavender that she uses with thrift for the fevers that trouble children's dreams. The drip is slow and very precious. She folds each drop into a stoppered bottle and writes upon the cork in ink made from oak galls gathered last autumn. Not all who come for healing are ill in body alone. A young wife arrives with eyes red from weeping, her voice trapped somewhere behind her ribs. She cannot speak the reason, or thinks she cannot, so Mera places a kettle on the coals and sits beside her until tears have run their course. She makes a tea of motherwort and balm and a thread of honey, and teaches a simple breathing that is no spell but helps all the same. When the woman leaves, she carries not only a small packet of herbs, but also a pebble smooth as moonlight to keep in her apron as a reminder that hands can find stillness, even when the heart cannot. Once, in the hour before dusk, danger arrives, a child with a deep splinter driven under the nail by a cracked bucket stave. He is brave until he sees the knife, then trembles as any child would. Mera makes a paste of flaxseed and warm water and lays it over the finger to soften the skin, then waits long enough to sing a lullaby under her breath. When she lifts the paste, the splinter has loosened. She draws it out with the tip of her knife, while the mother tells a funny story about a duck that learned to knock at the door with its beak. The child laughs and the blood brightens, and the fright runs out of him like water from a tipped pail. As the bell in the far tower calls the hour before Vespers, Mera steps into the garden with a small basket and a pair of shears. Evening is the time for flowers that close against noon glare to open again. She gathers a few last calendulas and the day's first night-scented stock, placing them in the basket not for medicine, but to sit in a jar by the bed of an old woman who finds sleep easier when the air smells of something gentle. The herb wife believes beauty has its own kind of healing, and she counts it among her simples. Back inside, she tidies the table and banks the fire so it will hold a quiet core of heat. She strains a pot of oil in which comfrey leaves have steeped, darkening it to the color of moss, then stirs in beeswax until the mixture thickens and gleams. While the salve cools, she writes by the door with a bit of chalk the plants safe to pick, tomorrow mint, yarrow, chickweed, so that the neighbor girl who come at first light to help will know what to gather. When all is in order, she sits on the threshold with her bowl and eats her simplest meal, porridge with a spoon of honey and a curl of apple, a heel of bread dipped in the juice of pickled beet, and a pinch of salt. The lane is quiet, save for an ox snorting in its sleep, and the murmuring talk of swallows on the thatch. Mera thinks of the faces who came today and names them one by one in her heart, like counting beads. She prays in this manner, with names and scents, and the small sounds each person makes when they breathe. The last visitor is a figure from the Abbey, a lay brother who travels with a lantern tucked inside his cloak so the wind cannot find it. He brings a message from Brother Oilric. A woman in childbed grows weary and will not be comforted by words alone. Mera takes her to leather bag where everything has a place, hooks, cloths, a fir cone to squeeze, small vials of lavender water and rose, a cord plaited from soft wool to pull upon, and she follows the brother through lanes rich with evening odors of smoke and damp soil. In the house where the woman labors, the air is tight with fear and the press of too many voices. Mera asks for quiet and is granted it, for though she is only a herb wife, the village trusts her calm. She bathes the woman's brow with lavender water and sets the wool cord in her hands, telling it to pull when the pain climbs and to breathe when it falls away. Between pains, she rubs the woman's back with rosemary oil and hums a tune so old it might be only breath. Hours pass like a slow tide. At last the child comes red and outraged and perfect. Mera lays the infant on the mother's chest and laughs softly, the sound no louder than the creak of a cradle. She leaves them wrapped in a peace that feels like snowfall on thatch, and steps back into the night with the lay brother, who gives her a grateful smile that shows all his years at once. The stars are brittle bright, and the hedges smell of cool earth. Somewhere, an owl calls from the oak by the mill pond. When she reaches her cottage, she sets down the bag and washes her hands with mint water in the bowl by the door, then closes the latch and thanks the unseen world for gentleness granted. Inside, the cottage rests like a sleeping beast. The hanging herbs are black shapes against the rafters. The jars hold moonlight caught and softened into muted gleam, and the table shows the tracks of the day, stains of sap, a smudge of wax, a single calendula petal stuck to the grain. Mera banks the hearth to ashes, sets a kettle of water aside for morning, and slips the chalkboard into the niche by the door so it will greet the dawn with instructions ready. She lies down on her narrow bed with the window open to the garden. Night air pours in with the cool scent of mint and earth. Beyond the hedgerow a fox barks once and moves on, leaving no trouble behind. Her cat settles into the hollow of her knees and purrs like bees a field away. The herb wife closes her eyes and sees not faces but leaves, each with its remembered use, each with the memory of the day's sun upon it. Sleep takes her as gently as a shawl laid over shoulders. Tomorrow she will wake before the bell, listen to the alder, warm the bread, and step again into the dew. She will pick only what the plants can spare, measure with a careful hand, bind with linen, and set onto the shelf a little more hope for the ones who will knock at her door. The cottage will breathe its green breath, the garden will hum, and the lane will bring back the world in need of soft answers. And she, Mera of the hedge and the mortar, will answer as she always has, with leaf and root, with water and thyme, with patience as steady as the turning of seasons. Far beyond the walls and lantern glow of any town, on a wide hill where grass rolls like a dark sea, a shepherd keeps watch. The night is deep and clear. Stars spill in countless silver points above the open fields. The flock lies scattered across the slope in quiet clumps, soft shapes drowsing under the sky. Only the faint clink of a bell or the rust of wool on grass breaks the hush. Edrin, the shepherd, sits wrapped in a heavy cloak beside a small, smokeless fire. He has chosen a hollow between two stones where the wind cannot reach him. His crook rests within easy reach. His dog Bramble lies with chin on paws, ears pricked though half asleep. Edrin's hands are busy with a little task, whittling a scrap of wood into a whistle. He works slowly, savoring the quiet hours when the world belongs only to sky and earth. By day, the hills are full of motion, sheep wandering, sun blazing, birds calling. But night brings a different life. The ground cools and smells of damp and sage. The sheep huddle or stretch where they will, their breath faint in the starlight. Above, constellations wheel slowly, and the moon rides low and pale. Edrin has learned each star's name from an old herdsman long dead, and he greets them like friends when they rise. The fire is small, just enough to warm hands and ward off the keenest chill. Its light gilds the nearest stones and the patient dog's fur. Bramble sighs, then lifts a head to scan the dark. A soft whine escapes, but no threat comes. Foxes prowl, and sometimes wolves, but tonight is peaceful. Still, Edrin keeps his ears tuned. A shepherd's sleep, if it comes at all, is always light. He thinks of the day now ended, driving the flock from the lower pasture at dawn, mending a broken hurdle by noon, sharing bread and cheese with a passing peddler in the afternoon. He has counted the lambs twice and knows they are safe. Yet he also knows how quickly safety can shift. A sudden storm, a wandering thief, a predator. So he keeps his vigil with patience, shaping the little whistle and humming now and then to keep wakefulness easy. The dog stirs and pricks her ears at a faint sound, hooves far off, maybe a deer or a late traveler. Edrin listens, one hand rested on the crook. After a moment, the sound fades. Nothing to fear. He reaches to scratch Bramble's head, murmuring a soft word. She relaxes, nose tucking back into tail. In the stillness, other sounds emerge. The tick of cooling stones, the whisper of wind through dry grass, the faint murmur of a brook somewhere below. The sheep themselves shift and breathe, a gentle sea of life. One bleats in its sleep, and a few nearby answer drowsily before settling again. The night is alive but calm, a lullaby sung by field and sky. Edrin finishes the whistle and tests it with a low note. Bramble's ears twitch, but she does not rise. He smiles, pocketing the new tool. It will serve to guide the flock when he needs a gentler call than his voice. Then he leans back against the stone and looks upward, letting the stars wash over him. He thinks of his father, who taught him these ways, to know each sheep by its bleat, to read weather in a cloud's edge, to follow stars home. He remembers nights like this long ago, when he was the boy drowsing beside the fire, while an older man kept watch. Now the care is his, and he feels its weight, but also its quiet honor. Few know the peace of a well-kept flock under a sky so wide. A shooting star streaks across the darkness, silent and swift. Edrin watches it fall and disappear beyond the ridge. He murmurs an old shepherd's wish for safe births in spring and steady grass through summer. The words are more habit than hope, but they bring comfort. Traditions hold the night steady. He rises to stretch, cloak falling loose around him. The air bites sharper on the hilltop, but movement wakes his blood. He walks among the sheep, soft-footed, tapping his crook lightly now and then so Bramble follows. They pass close to sleeping forms, a few wake and blink, but seeing their keeper, they settle again. The flock smells of lanolin and earth, a scent Edrin has carried home every day of his life. Reaching the far side of the pasture, he checks the low hurdle that keeps the flock from straying. It is sound. The knots he tied earlier hold. He pats the stake with quiet satisfaction and turns back toward the fire. Along the lay he stoops to pick a bit of wild thyme and rubs it between his fingers, breathing in its clean sharpness. Back at the fire, he feeds it a few twigs and sits again. The flames catch softly, painting gold on his weathered face. He draws out his small pipe, fills it from a pouch, and lights it with a coal. The smoke drifts upward, fragrant and faint. He does not smoke often, only on calm nights when no danger looms. Tonight feels worthy of that little ritual. He thinks of the town far away, where candles burn and watchmen walk. He has been there rarely on market days to sell wool or buy salt. The streets feel strange and tight compared to the wide fields, but he respects the life there. People keep each other safe in their way, just as he keeps his flock. Different work, same watchfulness. Bramble lifts her head again and whines low. Edrin listens. This time it is only the distant bark of another shepherd's dog across the valley, carried by the night air. He answers with a short whistle. The sound skips over the grass and back. Far away the other dog barks once more, and then all is quiet. He smiles, neighbors keeping silent company across the dark. Midnight deepens. The stars seem closer now, and the moon tips westward. The fire has burned low. Edrin lets it, saving fuel. His eyelids droop, but he fights sleep with small movements, rubbing his hands, humming a tune, scratching Bramble's ear. He knows if true sleep takes him, a fox might steal a lamb or the flock might drift. Vigil is his task until dawn. Sometimes his thoughts wander. He imagines his mother's warm kitchen, where a single lamp still glows, though she long ago stopped waiting up for him. He pictures the wool merchant's booth where his fleeces will hang come spring. He thinks of a girl in the village who smiled at him last market day. Dreams drift close, but he stays awake, content just to think. The night gives gifts to those who keep it. A sudden owl sweeping low and silent, wings wide as wonder, a fox slipping at the far edge of the flock, eyes catching starlight before vanishing. The slow bloom of dawn far off, long before it touches the field. Edrin notices each, storing them as stories for some future winter night. At last the eastern sky grows pale. First it is only a hint, a slight easing of the dark, but soon the stars thin and the horizon blushes faint rose. The sheep stir, shaking dew from their coats, and a soft murmur rises among them. Bramble stands and stretches, tail wagging in slow, sleepy arcs. Edrin rises too, stiff but satisfied. He has kept the night well. He stirs the last ashes of the fire and scatters them, covering any glow with earth. He slings his cloak tighter and whistles softly. The flock begins to gather, ready for the slow drive back toward the home pasture. The first bird sings, a lark somewhere unseen, and the sound seems to crack the whole sky open. As he walks, staff tapping gently, Edrin feels the quiet pride of duty done. No wolf came, no lamb was lost, and the world has turned safely from one night to the next. Behind him the stars fade, before him the low fields roll toward the waking day. When he reaches the edge of the village, he will trade watch for rest. But the memory of this vigil-wide sky, calm flock, the faithful dog at his side will remain like a slow burning ember. Night is a trust he keeps gladly, and each safe dawn feels like a gift returned.